Aloha and e kamomai kai ho'olokai. You know, we have a fantastic program lined up for you today, and we've got a really, really special guest. And I want to start off by saying it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, but it's the best time to be Republican right now. Today, joining me is Pat Psyche. She has a list of accolades that I could spend the whole day reading and conveying to you, but everybody quite well knows her. She has been at the forefront of making legislation for us here in Hawaii related to women, related to civil rights, related to all those issues that are important to us as Hawaiians and us as Republicans. So I want to be able to start with, the content of the show today is going to be really discussing debunking some of those myths that are out there about the Republican Party. Let me start with one of them. The Republican Party doesn't care about civil rights. The Republican Party doesn't care about civil rights. What do you say?
Ridiculous. Republicans were in the forefront fighting for civil rights. If you recall, you got to go all the way back to Abraham Lincoln. You've got to go back to the war between the states. What was that all about? I mean, Republicans were ready, willing, and able to fight for the rights of everyone. So to be accused of being racist is, to me, absolutely ridiculous.
Okay. So you heard it first from Pat. In fact, I believe that there are even some statistics related to the Republican Party in their involvement in the civil rights movement. And I think it goes that something like 80% of Republicans in the House and in the Senate voted for the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And less than 70% of Democrats did the same. In fact, Democrats tried to embrace a filibuster related to those bills, and it was the Republicans that stepped up and led the fight against breaking the filibusters in the 1964. Okay.
And here in Hawaii, of course, civil rights was never an issue, truly speaking.
Okay.
I mean, we believed in helping each other of all nationalities, all backgrounds, no matter where you came from, what color you were. People here have enjoyed a certain sense of equality. There is sometimes a little hint of favoritism for one race or another, but then that can be political.
Okay.
But necessarily speaking, I think overall Hawaii has been very fair as far as civil rights are concerned.
Wonderful. I happened to see a picture of Martin Luther King, and I think he was someplace near the East-West Center one day, and I said, Martin Luther King in Hawaii? I didn't even know he came here. Yeah, but he was even here during the civil rights period, during the 60s and all that
Yes.
kind of stuff. All right, let's move on to another myth that we really need to dispel, and that is that are Republicans, they don't care about the poor.
That's another myth that is absolutely wrong. I mean, we have participated in all of the social issues that have worked toward helping, making things more equal for the poor. And of course, we are labeled as the big business, shall we say, establishment type, fat cats,
rich.
rich. But truly speaking, without business, you have no income. Without income, everyone suffers, and the poor is especially affected. But I think Republicans have participated in endorsing Medicare, endorsing Medicaid. In fact, we have been in the forefront in leading for programs to help the poor.
You know, and historically speaking, we can go back to the policies of Booker T. Washington historically, where he was more focused on entrepreneurship and the building of businesses or the acquisition of skills that would in fact facilitate stability for one's household. So that historically was a virtue that even Booker T. Washington held dear, and he happened to have been a Republican as well. You know, along that, the reality is that Republicans are more than twice likely to give money to charities than the Democrats. In fact, as much a perfect example of which is that there was an individual who gave close to 77% of his income to charity, and I think that was the case of Dick Cheney, that he was able to do charitable giving and so all that kind of thing.
I had the pleasure of working with Dick Cheney.
Oh, wonderful. Share
Yes,
with me.
yes, yes. I was fortunate to be appointed by President George H.W. Bush
Okay.
to be the administrator of the Small Business Administration.
Wonderful.
You know, we had 4,000 employees, the entire United States, including Guam. And basically, the Congress had allocated and had determined that 10% of all of the defense budget would go toward small businesses.
Yes.
Well, at the same time that I was appointed, and Dick Cheney and I served together in the Congress, so I knew him personally. So when he was appointed Secretary of Defense, I called him and said to him, I would like to come down to your office to discuss with you the 10% of your budget that you're going to allocate to small businesses. He says, oh, Pat, you know, that's just idealistic. I said, no, it isn't idealistic. I'm the administrator of the Small Business Administration, my dear Dick, and I'm going to come down there to negotiate with you.
Wonderful. And you know, that's one of the issues that we oftentimes put laws on the books.
Yes.
But do we enforce them?
That's right. We
you
don't.
know, there has to be somebody that
Somebody,
is accountable
yeah,
for that.
You have to bird dog it all the time. And so he knew that I was on his back, and he reluctantly, in some instances, because mostly he was supportive, but when there was a little question, he leaned toward helping me out with the small business group. So we had a very warm relationship. Dick Cheney was a first-rate guy.
Wonderful. All right, let's move on to our another one of the myths that we in fact need to dispel, and that would be whether the position of how Republicans feel about engaging with women. Are the Republicans actively involved in a war against women?
Oh, gosh.
Preposterous.
That is preposterous. And this brings up a very important subject because, as you know, I served in the legislature for quite a few years.
Yes.
And 14 years, actually.
Proudly.
And yes, proudly. While I was there, President Nixon called and asked me to sit on his National Commission on the Status of Women. Mm-hmm. And the main subject that we discussed was to promote the adoption of the Equal Rights Amendment for the National Constitution. And we worked together very hard on the subject, brought in all the women from across the country to discuss the means by which we could achieve this. Well, we were quite successful, and we passed it as a measure, but we had to have 36 states to adopt it. And that's where we ran into some problems, except for Hawaii. Because basically, as long as I felt this was an area in which we would be primarily interested, I introduced the Equal Rights Amendment to our state constitution.
Wonderful.
Locked hands with John Ushijima, who was in the state senate then. This is a bipartisan effort. And I said to John, you introduce this bill there, I will introduce the companion in the House. We'll work together, and you can bet I will get the women organized to support this. And we did, and we achieved it. So we were the first state in the nation to adopt the Equal Rights Amendment to our state constitution. Until today, we stand very proud of that fact. At the same time, then, this whole involvement with equal rights for women got me very interested in taking a good look at the rest of the laws on the books. So I had Pat Putnam, her name was. Mm-hmm. She was in the Legislative Reference Bureau here in Hawaii, and I said, Pat, why don't you go through all of the legislation we have now and pick out all the areas in which you feel there is discrimination and draft up bills to stop it, to change it. And she did. She put together a raft of about 28 bills.
Amazing.
Amazing. And do you know 23 of them passed?
Amazing. With
Amazing.
that fortitude and with that
Absolutely.
vision.
Vision. And getting all the women in the community interested and concerned. I mean,
Which required collaboration, which
collaboration,
requires
cooperation,
cooperation,
and so forth, and understanding, and strength,
and
strength,
bipartisanship as well.
bipartisanship, right? So, because in those days, women could not borrow money. They could not own a mortgage in their own name. This was under the law. And unfortunately, women couldn't even have a credit card in her own name. Today, of course, we would like not to have any more credit cards. But in those days, you had to have your husband's name in order to get a credit card. And there were some very, very unfair laws that really discriminated against women. It was having to do with trusts and ownership of property, and if you are a divorced woman, whether you can use your maiden name again. You couldn't use your maiden name even in the professional world in those days. And we changed all that. And so I'm so proud that I was a part of it, but it didn't take
And
just
we
me.
thank you for it.
Oh, well, heavens.
And we thank you for
You
it.
got to thank all the women who are coalesced around this effort, so that today, at least, we know that on the books, we have women achieving equal rights. We even changed it from firemen to firefighters, policemen to police.
So
effort, yeah.
one of these days we'll eventually refer to it as Madam President as well.
Oh, very possible. Very possible.
Instead of being happy with, what is it? Instead of being happy with First Lady, we'll be willing to accept Madam President.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that day will come.
Okay.
It'll come.
You know, the reality is, in terms of the issue of women, it says that although most Republicans do not support the abortion issue, okay, this is not, and there has been persons who have tried to stir up the dust related to this issue. There's certainly no lack of clarity of wanting Republican women and all women to have equity within the United States.
Right. It's an issue that is still till today very divisive. People have their own opinions, but it's a law. I mean, the law is a law. Unless they change it, things have got to be respected. So
Okay.
it's an issue that, we can move on. Let's
Okay.
look at other concerns that we have.
Okay. And another myth that we would like to debunk right here, right now, is are Republicans racist? How do we embrace
Look
that?
at me. Look at you.
Duh.
I mean, we're both Republicans. There's no
Women
way.
of color.
Women of color. There's
Okay.
no way that you can say.
Just because you're
yeah.
Republican does not mean that you're racist.
Heavens no. Heavens no. I think that charge, and it's unfortunate Beth Fukumoto used racist and sexist as the reasons for her leaving the party. I mean, that's unfortunate. I know Beth. She is a wonderful person. She had, to me, a very great future in the Republican Party.
I wish her
I'm-
well.
And I wish her well, and I'm sorry she left. But when she used those two reasons why she left, I was quite embarrassed for her, because she knows that Republicans aren't racist and we're not sexist. She knows that in the bottom of her heart. So I wish her well. I just wish that she had not used those terms to describe us.
You know, it's funny when the reality is that actually the Republicans were involved in the founding of the NAACP. A lot of people are not aware of that.
I didn't know that. Really?
The Republicans were actually involved
No
in the
kidding.
development of the NAACP, and historically, if we check our facts, we'll find out that. And then another thing is that Republicans were actually involved in the founding of there are about 134 historical black colleges throughout the United States, of which about 25 of them were founded by Republicans. And let me share with you specifically the names of them, because I get tickled.
Oh, boy.
I get tickled because a lot of people don't recall or don't even associate or know that these were in fact founded by Republicans all the way back in the 1800s. And they are illustrious universities like Morehouse College, which is
Ooh.
primarily a male college and all that kind of stuff, founded in 1867. Howard University, founded in 1867.
Howard.
Spelman College,
I didn't know.
named after Rockefeller's wife. Shaw University, Fisk University, Atlanta University, Virginia Union University, Straits University in New Orleans, Clark College, that's also in Atlanta, Meharry Medical College,
Wow.
Morgan College, New Orleans University, Philander Smith College, Russ College, and Sam Houston College that's in Houston, just to name a few. So we really need to counteract some of the irresponsible myths that are out there that really need to be checked. Another thing I wanted to share with you in terms of the Republicans and African Americans involved with the Republican Party is that during the Reconstruction period in time, there were several African Americans who were Republicans. Let me share with you some of them. Hiram Revell, he was a Republican from Mississippi. Benjamin S. Turner, a Republican from Alabama. Robert DeLarge, a Republican from South Carolina. Joshua Walls, a Republican from Florida. Jefferson Long, a Republican from Georgia. Joseph Rainey, and Robert B. Elliott, both were Republicans from South Carolina. And most of the Republicans who were African Americans tended to come from Florida. So we really need to check these myths right here, right now, and be very, very clear.
You did your homework.
I tried to. I had a wonderful guest, so I had to do my homework because I knew you were going to read me my rights if I didn't do my homework.
Absolutely.
I wanted to maybe ask maybe 2 or 3 more questions in our last 10 minutes of time. Let's talking about the government-owned housing policies. Is that a myth that's going forth related to the Republican Party?
No, the housing question is mostly bipartisan. I think there are concerns on both sides. But as long as you're talking national events and the past and people who have contributed, let's talk about the local Republicans, because the Republican Party in Hawaii has made great contributions.
Yes.
And just because we may not have the majority vote in the House or the majority vote in the Senate does not mean that we are not effective.
Yes.
Today, we unfortunately are down to only 5 people in the House and no representation in the Senate, and that has got to change. If people want a 2-party government, if people want true representation, if they want good ideas to be presented, then they've got to look at both parties and look at candidates. So our local Republican Party has to concentrate on building the party first, finding candidates they can support, and being sure that they can get elected. But in the past, we have participated in relationships that are very, very important. We have formed coalitions. Republicans have formed coalitions. One coalition that I can speak of, because I was a part of it, was very, very dynamic. For 2 years, the Republicans and Democrats joined hands and accomplished an awful lot.
Okay.
I, for one, became chairman of the Committee on Higher Education
Yes.
to work on university issues
Yes.
and taking away from the then current chairman of the Higher Education Committee some, I think, hideous, erroneous directions that I felt were not proper. For instance, he wanted to put the Kapiolani Community College in a high-rise in Macaulay. And I said, no way are we putting Kapiolani Community College in a high-rise when we have all of that property in Diamond Head that John A. Burns was hoping would be the medical school complex. But because we couldn't get a medical school complex located there, I then moved to Kapiolani Community College there, and there it sits today. Very, very, very nice campus. The other thing he wanted to do was to put the law school library in the quarry, down in the pit. How are the kids going to get from the law school down to the library on a rainy day? No way is that going to happen. So after much review and much thinking and collaboration with the university, we put the law school library next to the law school where it belongs.
Would you think logically?
Yes, logically.
Obviously,
and it's there
a woman
now.
was involved in the process.
And there's so many other accomplishments of this nature that we moved to adopt when we joined in that coalition. So you see, Republicans and Democrats have good ideas. If they can only work together, this state can move forward. But if you only have one party dominating through rules, regulations, unbelievable taxation, draining the people of their funds that are necessary, accepting the high cost of living where a person has to work, people have to work 2 jobs and even then can't make ends meet, with the high cost of housing, with that.
That's criminal, actually.
It's criminal. And of course, this great rail system that's coming up, this steel on steel monstrosity that's slowly moving in toward town. And I have another mission here involving small businesses. There was a small businessman who wrote me, invited me to listen to his problem because it's an example of many problems for small businesses in the Kaka'ako area.
A couple of months ago, or a couple of years ago, I think it was Bloomberg, said that Hawaii was probably one of the worst places to do business.
That's right.
We have to overcome that.
That's right.
And that
here,
needs to be a public relations
That's right.
or an aggressive move
That's right.
to correct that message.
That's right.
Because it does us a disservice. It does the next generation a
That's right.
disservice.
But here is Hart, coming in with their great steel on steel, shall we say, project that is supposed to alleviate us to some degree from all the traffic we have. And they want to move into Kaka'ako, and so they condemned property there. The small businesses were condemned at prices that are unbelievably low. So these small businesses are left with conviction. And we have a law that says they have to be compensated for their moving costs. Well, Hart refused to give them the cost, the money for their movement. So what happens? The businesses can't move. They don't have the money to move. And this project is not going to arrive in Kaka'ako for another 5 or 10 years. So
what happens to them in the interim?
All right. In the meantime, they're sued. They're taken to court by Hart for contempt. So these small businesses are really suffering.
And who can fight with those court prices?
That's right. The lawyer fees. So
I'm talking in terms of a small business person.
Well, we now have a Republican administration, and the Secretary of Transportation happens to be Elaine Chao.
Yes.
Okay.
Who comes from the Bush background as well.
That's right. Elaine Chao and I worked together very closely when she was Deputy Transportation Secretary.
Yes.
And I was head of SBA. We got to know each other very well.
So you know each other.
So I wrote her a personal letter to alert her to this sad situation where these small businesses are so negatively impacted to the point where they're being trampled on. And so I'm hopeful that she will be alerted to this whole effort that is costing all of us a tremendous amount of money, and it is assumed or presumed or predicted that the traffic problems will be alleviated maybe by 2%. So where are we headed? These are the concerns that must be brought to bear, and they're not going to be brought to bear as vividly by the Democrats who are in charge. Republicans, I think, can do more to alert people of their rights. So if there are any reasons why people should consider voting for Republicans, it should be to provide a loyal opposition.
Absolutely. In a two-party
In
system.
a two-party
That's
system.
active. You know, in our last few minutes of the program, I want to extend my heart-filled warm thanks for coming out. We've taken the opportunity to dispel several of the myths that have been out there and circulated to the dismay of the Republican Party that have really not given credit to the hard work that the Republicans have done in the community.
There's one more thing.
Yes.
The stopping of the bombing of Kaho'olawe.
Oh.
I forgot to mention.
Yes.
I'll make it very short.
Yes.
At the time that I was in the Congress and Matsunaga died,
Yes.
Senator Matsunaga died, the Republicans wanted to find a candidate to run for the United States Senate. So President H.W. Bush called me into the Oval Office and asked me to run for the Senate. I said, I could consider the race very seriously, Mr. President, but you've got to help me. He says, how can I help you? I said, stop the bombing of Kaho'olawe. He says, how can I do that? I said, it was ordered originally by a Democrat president by executive order, so you can then rescind that order and stop the bombing. He says, well, John Sununu, my chief of staff, please get the spelling of that island correctly, and we'll see what we can do.
And that was done by a Republican.
By a Republican.
Who
2 months
cares?
later, he cared. He stopped the bombing of Kaho'olawe. And today, I think he doesn't get the credit he deserves as a Republican president.
All right. Final words. I want to once thank you. We could talk for
It was
days,
fun,
I want you to know,
Yes,
okay? We could discuss the issue for days because there are a lot
I
of
had
issues
to
that we can.
bring that in.
But, and there are a lot of things that perhaps the Republicans haven't been credited for in
That's
the
right.
past. That right here, right now, we want to change that message. We want to get that, debunk those myths, and I think we've taken that opportunity to be able to do so. And I think we're going to be signing off as this time. Once again, I want to thank you. But
It was my pleasure.
this may, in fact, probably be the issue because we now probably have to do credibility,
Right.
you know, issues and all those kinds and raise those concerns
That's
that
right.
the general public has had.
Right.
Women have, for a long time, been used to suffering, but we need to know that by our participation in the government, we can, in fact, stop our suffering. And I think
Right.
by offering or having the option of having a two-party system that allows for opinion and differences of opinion, I think we can only benefit
That's
from
right.
that. All right?
Absolutely.
Thanks very much, guys.